Now I take high achieving women from overgiving, overdoing, and striving for more, always doing all the things for everyone so that they can start living life from the inside out and really identify what they value. So they're creating a life that brings them happiness automatically. And I have a wonderful guest for us today. Her name is Ruby Raja. And Ruby specializes in helping people who've been abused or experienced trauma realize how amazing they are by changing the lens with which they view themselves. As a domestic violence and coercive, I think I said that right, coercive control trainer and trauma facilitator, Ruby works with men, women, and young people. So we're going to have a beautiful conversation here. So get ready for lots of fun and give me one moment. We'll be right back with you.
Ladies, are you the one who gets it all done? Always pushing forward, always striving? In the constant chase for success, when was the last time you took a moment just for you? We're always on the go, rushing from one task to the next, barely pausing to catch our breath. What if we took a moment to pause? Imagine listening in, really listening, to the wind, to your heartbeat, to your soul. What if slowing down was the key, a chance to discover a deeper connection with yourself? And from that connection, expand it to those you love, to the moments that truly matter. Pause, reflect, connect. It's time to live fully from the inside out.
Here we are. Okay, so Ruby, it is so lovely to have you on a Soulful Pause this morning. I want to thank you for coming and being here. And I gave your introduction, so let's dive in. Are you ready for some questions? Why don't let's just have you speak a little bit because I'm kind of rushing you. And I want to hear from you about what it is that brought you to do the work that you do. If you can just give me a brief summary of that, I think the audience would really love to hear from you.
Right. First of all, thank you so much, Gisette, for inviting me. I'm really honored to be here. I'm really looking forward to all the work that we do to reach the people that we're trying to reach. And what actually brought me here was life itself just unfolding and finding myself just helping people. You know, when somebody comes along, they have a problem, and you just help them, and you think everybody else is doing that. So that's what I was doing, and I'd assumed everybody else was doing it. I also didn't even really realize that I was working in domestic violence until many, many years later when I actually worked officially in that field. And I realized, oh, I've been working in domestic violence. So my journey has kind of happened organically. But unfortunately, I did recognize the pain that people went through much, much earlier in life. So as young as their teens, and watching how they navigated that, but at that age, not understanding all the other technicalities that life brings about families and understanding and how you're raised. So yeah, that it's happened organically.
Wow, that's really beautiful. I think the best things are when you're able to follow that, you follow it almost in a subconscious way, right?
Yes.
So how would you say that like your own experiences, if any, with trauma influence the way that you approach your work?
So if I could share something that's happened to me recently, and I won't go into detail because it could be triggering for people. This last incident changed the way I worked because I got a much more personal, deep experience into what trauma was. So unfortunately, somebody, a man in this instant, decided that he was going to attack me. And this happened in November 2020. So he came up from behind, and that instance of him squeezing me so tightly. I didn't give him permission. I didn't invite anything. It was a cold, wet day, so I was dressed as you dress for a cold day. So there was nothing that I had done. He had made a choice, and that choice was going to change my life. So the trauma that I experienced through that incident really helped me focus in on what women go through, how their lives are affected, but
Mhm.
much more important than that, what happens to our mind and body. So although I
Yeah.
was aware of domestic violence and trauma, I personally attacked that moment that your life changes.
Yeah.
And in that instance, what we don't understand, and I think I got really, really lucky because I found a trauma program, which is the one that I now am certified to facilitate. We think we can manage that over time, it'll get easier. Over time, we'll learn what's happening. But it's not like that. That's not how trauma works.
Yeah.
What happened in that instance, my mind, body, and soul felt like it disconnected.
Mhm.
My mind was thinking one thing while my body was doing something else. I was trying to listen to my body and make sense of it, and I couldn't because, I didn't have the tools at that point. I didn't know how adrenaline works in the body. I
Yeah.
didn't understand our safety mechanism. So we're built with an inbuilt safety mechanism. So when you do something, your body's already telling you there's danger here, or it heightens your responses to fear. When those safety mechanisms get destroyed or dismantled or shut down, we don't have any way of responding. So what I
Mhm.
learned for me, that when he did that, my safety mechanisms completely shut down, and I was not going to know how to function regardless until I understood how I have to reset how my life is gonna be. And it's really hard work, Gisette. It's such hard work.
Yeah.
People don't give themselves the credit, and they also don't give themselves the kindness you need to in that point,
Mhm.
because you don't know what's happening. The most common reactions, and we all have them, I had them, we start thinking we're going crazy.
Yeah.
Whatever's going on in our body or in our mind, every thought we have with it, we think, no, 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 there's something wrong with me. I'm losing my mind. I'm cracking up, whatever words you use from whichever country, without realizing your body's trying to talk to you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think
Yeah.
that's such an important thing to mention because, we have all these, like, instinctual feelings, right, that come in waves after some kind of a trauma,
Yes.
and when that's occurring, I think that then our mind kicks into and correct me if I'm wrong, your mind kicks into this whole pattern of trying to keep you safe, which then can sometimes turn into criticism.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
that then carries over and it kind of perpetuates the trauma and keeps it in this cycle. So
Mm.
how do you how do people and since you've dealt with this,
Mhm.
how do you keep yourself from revisiting and rehashing all of that when you get these sensations and then your mind goes there and then you're on that hamster wheel? How do you do that?
So that's the point at which you need to have somebody who's either been through it, and
Uh-huh.
by that I don't mean been through exactly what you've been through, but understands trauma. And
Yeah.
I'm not talking about trauma specialists. And
Mhm.
the reason I'm saying that word is only because had I had somebody telling me what to do,
Yeah.
or, "Oh, you're saying this, so this falls under this category, so you're probably
Mhm.
going to experience this," I don't think I would have healed. So you need to find mechanisms that help you validate yourself. Once you learn there are all these clusters and there are these techniques, so there's lots of coping mechanisms that you can use.
Yeah.
What will work for me won't work for you. What calms me down is not going to calm you down. And I think the real essence of trauma is to realize no two people are going to experience it the same. And that's where it gets complicated because diagnosing it is not easy.
Mhm. Mhm.
Weeks and weeks and months of your behaviors happening are not what the doctor's going to listen to. They're going to listen to half an hour of you if you're lucky,
Yeah.
half an hour of what's happened and whatever you're telling them is happening. You know what triggers you. You know what happens in your life that you have to be careful of
Yes.
or avoid. So it's very difficult. So it's not one program fits everybody. It's you taking what you need from each program or
Mhm.
each body of information and then working with that and moving through it. So, for example, I, because I was attacked by a man on my journey home, so I had to cross a bridge in London. And on
Yeah.
that journey home, I started getting triggered by young men because the man that attacked me was about 15 years younger than me. So every time I saw a man, something told me there was danger and that I
Right.
needed to fear this man.
Yeah.
And the problem with me was the other side of my mind was saying, "You're not afraid of that man. You've got nothing to fear from him." So I had real conflicting things going inside my kind of my chest in my head. And what I learned was that falls into one of the triggers of one of the forgive me, one of the clusters of trauma. So
Yeah.
I was being hypervigilant, and hypervigilant has so many behaviors that I can't even begin to share what they are. And then there are three other main clusters. So if you end up falling into one of those clusters, like emotional numbing, for example, where
Mm.
you think you're managing something because
Yes.
instead of addressing it,
Yeah.
you just push it aside and you think, "That's okay, I can manage, I don't like Gisette, so I'm just not going to talk to her. If
Yeah.
she's on a call with me, I will be polite and that's fine." So you avoid the issue and instead of
Mhm.
actually saying, "Hi, Gisette, how are you?" and opening up that door to things releasing, you're making more and more problems for yourself and you don't know that because
Mhm.
you're trying to deal with it in the best way you know how. And how do I know this? Because I've done that too. You think you're managing something, and then
Yes.
it was actually the program on which I learned when you do this, you actually make it worse for yourself in the long run. So as you learn how to manage these triggers that we call them,
Mhm.
you can actually take your life back. You can claim back how you live your life instead of getting scared of things.
That's you brought up such a great point, because I can resonate with this. I wanted to ask you when you were speaking, and you talked about emotional numbing. Is it possible that someone who's experienced trauma might not they manage all the things, right? Like, they start feeling better because their life is
Mm,
somewhat moving smoothly.
yes.
And then one day you kinda start to realize there's been I call it like a defrosting,
Yeah.
like a slow defrosting, and then you have some realizations that the trauma that you experienced had been kind of frozen in little places within you that you may not have been able to handle at the moment. And so when you get well enough, they start to defrost. Is this accurate?
Again, because trauma is so
And different for
unique,
everyone? Yeah.
it can absolutely happen like that. What I will say is if you've experienced trauma, you
Mhm.
do need something to learn how to manage what you're
Yeah.
feeling, because this consistent thought of feeling that you're going crazy is so common. So all the people
Mhm.
I've worked with, and I have worked with men, women, and young people, every single person has said to me, "I thought I was going mad.
Mm.
It felt like I was going crazy." And to share what they've experienced because it's so random, you feel quite silly when you're saying it. But people like us, the trauma
Yeah.
facilitators that I know, because we've been through our share of triggers that were difficult to explain, but we've actually talked to
Mhm.
each other about them, there isn't anything you can say to us where we'll go, "Oh my God, you do look and sound like you're going crazy." We're just going to help you
Yeah.
identify,
Yeah.
validate that,
Uh-huh.
validate that that's what's happening in your body and that's how you're feeling it.
Mm.
So it's the complexity of trauma can't be expressed enough. But
Right.
taking your life back is easier than you think. It is hard work. Let me stress that. So
Yeah.
the 7 sessions that I deliver on trauma, they're about an hour and a hour and a half long. You get a lot of information, but you do have to apply it. You have to
Mhm.
apply what you're going to learn. And you can do it piecemeal, so you can spread it over months and years. But if you apply it, you'll get much quicker results. I was surprised with all of the people I've worked with that within the 2 months that I worked with them, there was a significant change from the first time to the 7th session. And they themselves were telling me what they were doing
Yeah.
and how they'd managed it. So
Mm.
that frozenness that you're talking about, the more difficult parts of the trauma will be frozen in bigger pieces, is what I would say.
Mm.
You have the small ones that you think
Right.
you can manage, and then you have the big ones that you don't want to touch.
Right.
And so I would agree with that. And I think there are so many variations of how it shows up in your body.
Yeah. Yeah. That I would say that's probably very true.
Mhm.
But can you speak on a little bit of being a coercive? Um,
Coercive control.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm like, I know there's like 2 words there. So, because I think that's something that is very subtle for people,
Yeah.
and families don't and friends don't really recognize the intensity of that type of behavior
Yeah.
and manipulation.
So that's such a complex behavior to unpick. And the simplest way that I can describe it in terms of the people that I've worked with over the last 20, 30 years
Mhm.
is that the partner is actually residing in the head of the victim, whether it's male to female or female to male. They figure out a way of breaking you down in such a way that you're isolated from all the people that are important to you. So they break you away from your family, they break you away from your friends,
Mhm.
and then you start to think the way they want you to think. And it's very important that whoever's around that person tries to continually give them support. Now, I'm saying that having given support and also being the person who's kind of tried to fix it for a friend or a loved one or somebody I care
Yeah.
for. And what happens in that process is because they can't think straight, because they're dealing with coercive control all the time, they're confused with the emotional connection that they have,
Mhm.
not wanting to offend the partner and protect them at the same time, but also getting confused now because something's obviously happened and they don't want to get out. They want to figure out what's happening, and it's really, really difficult.
Yeah.
So what friends and family can do is listen and be there all the time. I've had a lot of people talking about different types of domestic violence and trying to protect a child from a parent that's abusive and helping
Mhm.
them to get through and understand, no, 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 you don't do it like this. Unfortunately, it's a waiting game. And the more you can support them and the more you can just be there and maybe just give elements of information and use a third person, because I think it's easier to say, oh, my friend went through this. She was experiencing that. It kind of sounds like you're experiencing that. So the more doors you can open,
Mhm.
more likely they are to reach out to you. When you
Mhm.
try to tell them, and there are so many people I know that have had to back off from sisters or mums or really, really close family and friends because they've so much wanted to rescue them and you can't,
Yeah.
because it happens over such a long period of time. If you're in a relationship, so if we look at male to female, the person doesn't come in immediately and start harming you. They build you up, they connect with you, and they make it sound like they're the other half to you. You know that yin and the yang.
Yes. Yeah.
Finish your sentences because they're listening so intently. The danger we have in these types of relationships, and I have to stress this here, that some of the behaviors are like a healthy, good relationship. The difference in the dynamics is the power dynamic, that one
Mhm.
person is taking your power away. Analyzing or assessing that is critical in that relationship. So if the person has been loving and they've built up that relationship and they've listened so carefully, you and I both would think, oh my God, we found our soulmate. We've the best person in the world.
Mhm.
I found my partner, without
Right.
realizing what an abuser does to the narcissist who's using coercive control. What they're doing when they're listening to your information, they're not listening like a friend or somebody who cares. They're listening and creating an arsenal of weapons to use against you.
Mhm.
So when you end up in that relationship, as it goes further down the road, and the reason I mentioned isolation earlier, that's one of their biggest tactics.
Right.
How they're able to take you away from your mom, from your sisters, from your girlfriends, all the people that you had a relationship with
Mm-hmm.
suddenly disappear. One of the things I tell people that I work with is at the end of the day, give yourself a few minutes, and if you can't do it at the end of the day, find a few minutes in the day where you think about your relationship and where you are in it. Because in those relationships, you've been pushed out of the picture a long time ago,
Mm-hmm.
and you
Yeah.
can't see it.
Mm-hmm. I think, so what I'm hearing you say, I just want to kind of go over
Mhm.
what families and friends can do to help support this person in their life that they see experiencing something like this,
Mhm.
is to just continually support them, to
Yes,
continually reach out, not to go away.
absolutely. If you can be the listening ear, and
Mhm.
it's really hard, so let me stress that too. It's not easy
Yeah.
because they go around cyclically for weeks and months and years. And because you love them so much, you desperately want to get them out of there. But if we can stay on the listening side, the listening side actually is very difficult to explain because I myself, when I've listened to people in the past, you
Mhm.
know what they're going to say because they've said it hundreds of times. But
Mhm.
somewhere in that listening, they will every now and then give you a little bit more.
Yeah.
But we have to learn to hear a little bit more and not get excited that this is a way that I can get to them, but use those bits of information they give you to open
Mhm.
up more doors and say, well, what would you like to do? You know,
Yeah.
you used to do this. Would you like to do that again? So kind of reconnecting them with who they were.
Yeah. Oh,
Most,
that's brilliant. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
most of the people we're working with have forgotten who they used to be
Mhm.
because they're so intent on protecting the person that's hurting them, they can't see it.
Right, and I think that that's something that most people in society doesn't really understand about, they think the person is weak or they think they're in on it in a way,
Mhm.
like they agree
Yes.
with the person, and
Yeah.
so it creates this whole level of complexity, I think, for
Mhm.
the victim,
Mm.
and then that healing process is a long process. And it requires so much patience and grace.
Yes.
What would you say are the biggest things that you would love to see society and, the world at large understand about coercive control and trauma?
Right. They're 2 brilliant questions, and they're actually PhD questions. That's an entire thesis.
It's true.
Um, I think in the world of domestic violence, people need to support their friends. When
Mhm.
their friends are getting involved in relationships, friends, relatives, they need to be there for them and kind of throw out a few random questions. So when they're telling you how amazing this person is, not to cut them down and say, "Oh, no, no, I don't think anybody can be that great," but to say,
Yeah.
"Well, what about you? How are you, what are you doing in your spare time, or do you have time to meet friends?" It's kind of
Mm.
keeping them real and connected.
Yeah.
In the world, of course, of control, the partner takes all the trust, all the secrets that you have, and is building up that to use them against you, and maybe kind of just checking in on what kind of things they're talking about if your friend or loved one allows you to do that, because they don't normally let you do that.
Yeah.
In terms of people or the world understanding it, I think people need to step back because both of them are very complicated situations to unravel, and they
Mhm.
are both in need of being unraveled. People often say things like, "Well, if she's going through that, why doesn't she leave?" And then there's an exercise I do in which I get people to close their eyes and leave their home, and then I get them to go through a series of things, and then I tell them, "Okay, so now you've left your home.
Mhm.
Now think about the fact that you can never go back there. You know, when you leave your home every morning, you've got your
Mhm.
key and everything, you expect to go home. When
Right.
you're asking somebody to leave an abusive relationship, you're literally asking them to leave everything they know. So
Mhm.
obviously, I do a much more detailed explanation of
Yes.
the exercise.
Yeah.
You are not allowed to go back into that space ever because your safety is at risk. So if you don't have the tools to know how to leave that environment safely, why
Right.
would you and why
Mhm.
should you? Because the people that are making the statements, you know, why don't they leave? They don't have to do anything with the situation. If
Yeah.
they get a person to leave that relationship, they don't
Mhm.
have to deal with the next week, month, years. It takes a long time to build up social capital and trust.
Yes.
It
Yeah.
takes a moment to break it down. And I can guarantee you, if you force somebody out of a relationship that they don't have the skills to leave,
Mhm.
they will be more damaged because they know how to function in this abuse.
Right.
They don't know how to function in a healthy, regular environment. We
Yeah.
have to give them those tools to learn and figure out. And then when they make the decision, there's nothing that the abuser can do to them that they can't handle because they will have made the decision having the tools to manage their lives. Because often there are children involved
Mhm.
and there are other important things. And I'm just going to touch on things like animals.
Yeah.
If you've got an animal and you're in a domestic violence relationship, the
Right.
chances are he's going to be harming them.
Oh, goodness.
You know,
Yeah.
and we don't think about all the other things
Right.
that the victims, whether it's trauma and whether it's domestic violence, there's so many other parts to that moving wheel that
Right.
they know about that you don't. So I'd like the world to know people have found themselves in a situation, and although you think it can't and won't happen to you, it can. When I was attacked, I remember thinking, I'm not victim material.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I'm very assertive, I'm quite confident, I go
Mhm.
about my business, and yet this man made a decision and did what he had to do.
Right.
And as I said at the beginning, I was one of the lucky ones. I found a program that was
Mhm.
truly a healing program.
I think that's just genuinely so important. You know, I think that, like, it's very easy. You brought this up, and I think it's so important to touch on it even a little bit more. It's
Mhm.
so easy to think from the outside that you would do something different. Yet, when you said those words, "Not return to your home," I felt panic in me. Just listening to that,
Yeah,
because I think that, depending on where you've been in your life, how you were raised, what your value is, what your values are, not your value, your values are,
yeah,
you can really, um, you can really be manipulated in those ways based on what can, set you off in a way. So you can think that it could never touch you, yet
yeah.
you don't know when there is someone in your midst that's a master manipulator who
Yes.
does not present or appear to be, uh, this other personality, I guess. Um, you really can't understand until someone can kind of do that to you, and it can stick with you for a long time if you don't get the right kind of help, or even when I mentioned those frozen parts.
Yeah.
My own experiences have been that, um, even through therapy, if I have a frozen part of myself,
Mm.
that doesn't get touched. And so you continually have to monitor yourself, have, like you were saying, build the muscle. That's what I hear
Yes,
you saying. Build
yes,
the muscle with the tools.
yeah,
And the more your muscles are built, just like anybody knows when they lift weights, you can
yes,
you can carry more, right?
absolutely.
So
And
I
also,
love that. Yes.
sorry, I was just going to say the programs that I deliver, you take what you want at the time you want it. And I think that's the difference between the work that I do in the healing sphere
Yeah.
to what is out there, because at no point am I going to say to you, oh, but you must do this, because you something that feels small to me,
Yes.
as a facilitator, for
Mhm.
you may be the biggest problem that you're dealing with, and you can't go there because you can't explain to me all the other things that lead in to making that issue so great.
Yes.
And so that part that you're saying, that, unfreezing those parts, you do that. And when we give you the tools, you use the tool you want. I've always said this, that sometimes you need a hammer, sometimes you need a surgeon's scalpel, because you just need to go there and touch it, and
Mhm.
that's it. But you do at times need to smash things, because in order to take your power back, you
Mhm.
also have to recognize it's not your fault, which is such an important part, that when people are
Yes.
attacked or in domestic violence situations, you didn't do anything for that to happen. But as the information has been built on, it feels like you did something because the abuser makes you feel that way. So
Yeah.
that's another thing that we work on those things, and we get you to see how great you are,
Mm. That's
which I
beautiful.
think is really important.
Yes. It is. I love this conversation, and, I'd like to have probably more of these, so, I have something in the works that I wanna talk to you about later,
Right.
and I would like to know, is there any direction you'd like to give the audience in how you can help them? Do you have your website? Are you doing anything special coming
Yes.
up?
So I have a website that they can go on and find lots of information. So I've got some words, as in, I have a learning page which focuses on victims, practitioners. Then I have a Muslim specific page. So there's words that I've identified for people to look at and be able to go,
Mhm.
that's what I think I'm in. So, for example, birdcage. Evan Stark introduced the concept of the bird cage. So
Yeah.
you've got things like that that you can, just go onto the website and have a look. In the resource section, I've got some videos. So depending on how much information you need or want, there's some interesting videos that will give you a little bit more power. But if I was
Mhm.
speaking to the people that are in these situations now, I would say to them, whatever's being said to you, obviously you have to listen to it in that situation, because you're probably struggling a bit right now. But
Yeah.
stop, literally put your hand up and go, no, 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 that's not me. I am, and then define yourself, define who you want to be, because we keep hearing a narrative that someone else is giving us.
Mm.
Once we start taking the power out, so what I claim to do in my work is to fracture that. So the minute you have a fracture in something, you can work on it and make it break. And when you break a bone, you
Mhm.
have to do a lot of work to get that back. So
Mm.
if we can get people who are being abused to put a fracture in that relationship that they've got, so you're fracturing what the abuser's doing to you,
Yeah.
you can start. What happens in that situation is, once you take back a little bit of power and you stand up a little bit and you're scared to death, the abuser has to change tactics, and you
Mhm.
keep building on how strong you are. So I would say, whoever is harming you, whoever is saying what they're saying, you have to figure out a way of stopping it, stopping your mind believing it. So that would be the first step. And then start working on what you want.
Mhm.
And if you can find a way out, maybe through my website, maybe through talking to other people, then start exploring, because on my website, I have an exit button. So if you're on my website and somebody comes along, just hit the exit button. You'll go to some weather page or news page.
Oh,
So
beautiful.
yeah, it protects you in that way
Wow.
too. Yeah,
That's a really important thing for people to know,
yeah,
that
yes,
you can look at the website and still have privacy, and a
absolutely.
quick way to, erase the screen so that
Yeah,
no one can see it.
yeah. And with my website, they can leave me a message and they can tell me what times they would like me to contact them.
Mhm.
If that's what they want, I'm more than happy to reach out in that way. But for me, the important thing is, each and every one of us deserve to have our hearts
Yeah.
intact, you know, and to know that you are not defined by somebody else's actions.
Yes.
You can take your life back. There are people out there, there are tools out there. So that's what I would say
Yeah.
to people experiencing
What
abuse.
What a blessing you are. I mean, seriously, thank you. I really enjoyed having this conversation with you. I think it's extremely important. I think there's more people that, experience these types of situations than people really know or realize.
Absolutely.
And I love the explanation of creating the fracture. It's like
Mm,
providing the amount of space that's needed for you to kind of, like, recover yourself a bit so you can take the next steps.
yeah.
So such important work you do, Ruby. Thank you. I'm so honored that you were here.
Thank you. I really appreciate being here.
All right. Thank you everyone for coming, and we'll be back next Thursday on A Soulful Pause, and I will talk to you then. All right.